In this video, you are going to learn English through a true and extraordinary story. Today's story is about Juliane Koepke, a 17-year-old girl who survived one of the most unbelievable accidents in aviation history. After her airplane was struck by lightning, she fell nearly 3,000 meters into the Amazon rainforest, and somehow survived. What happened next was even more incredible. Alone, injured, and surrounded by one of the world's most dangerous jungles, Juliane had to rely on her courage, determination, and the lessons her parents had taught her. As you listen to this story, you will improve your English while discovering one of the greatest survival stories ever told. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and support my work on Ko-fi. The link is in the description below. Now, let's begin the story. Juliane Margaret Koepke was born on October 10, 1954, in Lima, the capital of Peru. Her parents were German scientists who had dedicated their lives to studying animals and plants in the Amazon rainforest. Her father, Hans Wilhelm Koepke, was a zoologist. Her mother, Maria Koepke, was a respected ornithologist who specialized in birds. Instead of growing up in a large city, Juliane spent much of her childhood deep in the Peruvian jungle. Her parents had established a biological research station called Panguana, where they studied wildlife and the rainforest ecosystem. Life there was very different from life in the city. There were no supermarkets, no busy streets, and no movie theaters. Instead, Juliane grew up surrounded by towering trees, colorful birds, curious monkeys, and countless insects. She learned from an early age that the rainforest was both beautiful and dangerous. Her parents taught her how to recognize poisonous animals, how to cross rivers safely, and how to find her way through the dense jungle. They believed that knowledge and respect for nature were the keys to survival. Juliane listened carefully. She never imagined that these lessons would one day save her life. As Juliane grew older, she attended school in Lima. During the school year, she lived in the city, but she always looked forward to returning to the rainforest during holidays. It felt like home. She loved helping her parents with their scientific work. She enjoyed observing birds, collecting plants, and exploring the jungle trails. Nature fascinated her. Like her parents, she dreamed of becoming a scientist. By the time she was 17 years old, Juliane had already spent years learning about the Amazon. She knew how quickly the weather could change. She understood that every sound in the jungle meant something. Most importantly, she had learned never to panic. Her parents often reminded her that fear could lead to bad decisions. Staying calm could save a life. Those words would soon become more important than ever. It was December 24, 1971. Christmas Eve. Juliane and her mother had been visiting family in Lima. Now they were preparing to fly back to Panguana so they could celebrate Christmas with Juliane's father. Their flight was operated by LANSA, a Peruvian airline. The aircraft was a Lockheed L-188 Electra, a 4-engine turboprop airplane. Many people wanted to travel before Christmas, so the flight was completely full. Families, children, business travelers, and tourists all boarded the aircraft. The atmosphere was cheerful. People smiled, talked, and looked forward to spending the holidays with their loved ones. Juliane chose a window seat. She always enjoyed watching the clouds from above. Her mother sat beside her. Neither of them knew that this ordinary flight would soon become one of the most famous aviation disasters in history. The airplane took off from Lima without any problems. At first, everything seemed normal. Passengers relaxed in their seats. Some people read newspapers. Others looked out of the windows. Flight attendants served drinks and smiled politely. After about half an hour, however, the weather began to change. Dark clouds appeared ahead. The airplane entered a powerful thunderstorm. Rain hit the windows. Lightning flashed around the aircraft. The turbulence became stronger. Some passengers looked nervous. Others held onto their armrests. Juliane's mother became concerned. She quietly looked out of the window. The storm seemed unusually violent. Then, in a single terrifying moment, everything changed. A bright flash of lightning struck the airplane. There was a deafening explosion. The cabin shook violently. Passengers screamed. Luggage flew through the air. One of the wings broke away. The aircraft began to fall. Out of control. Juliane later remembered hearing her mother's final words. "This is the end. It's all over." The airplane was breaking apart around them. Seats were ripped from the cabin. The roar of the wind became overwhelming. Within seconds, Juliane was no longer inside the airplane. Still strapped to her seat, she was falling through the sky. Alone. More than 3,000 meters above the Amazon rainforest. She lost consciousness before she reached the trees. For a long time, Juliane remembered nothing. Everything was dark. There was no sound. No movement. No feeling. Then, slowly, she opened her eyes. At first, she could not understand where she was. Above her, she saw tall trees reaching toward the sky. Sunlight filtered through the leaves. Birds were singing. The air was warm and humid. For a brief moment, everything seemed peaceful. Then reality returned. She was lying on the forest floor. She was still strapped to her airplane seat. Her glasses were missing. One of her sandals had disappeared. Her clothes were torn. Her body ached with pain. She had survived a fall of nearly 3,000 meters. It seemed impossible. Yet somehow, she was alive. Juliane slowly unfastened her seatbelt. Every movement hurt. She looked around. Pieces of the airplane were scattered among the trees. Broken branches covered the ground. But there was no sign of other passengers. No voices. No rescue teams. Only silence. She called for her mother. There was no answer. She called again. Still nothing. The realization was heartbreaking. She was completely alone. At first, Juliane thought she might be dreaming. How could anyone survive such a crash? She checked her injuries. She had a deep cut on her right arm. Her collarbone was broken. One of her eyes was swollen almost shut. Her body was covered with bruises. But she could still stand. She could still walk. It was nothing short of a miracle. Most people would have panicked. Juliane did not. She remembered everything her parents had taught her. Her father had often said, "If you are ever lost in the rainforest, don't wander aimlessly. Find water." Her mother had taught her the same lesson. Small streams usually flow into larger streams. Larger streams become rivers. And rivers often lead to people. Juliane knew exactly what she had to do. She had to find water. She began walking through the dense jungle. The rainforest was unlike any place on earth. The trees blocked much of the sunlight. Thick vines hung from every direction. The ground was covered with wet leaves and tangled roots. The air was hot. Mosquitoes buzzed constantly around her. Colorful butterflies flew past. Monkeys called from the treetops. Somewhere in the distance, strange birds cried out. The jungle was alive. But it could also be deadly. There were poisonous snakes. Venomous spiders. Scorpions. Large insects. And hidden dangers beneath almost every step. Juliane knew that one careless mistake could cost her life. After several hours, she heard a familiar sound. Running water. She followed it until she reached a small stream. A smile appeared on her face. She remembered exactly what her father had taught her. Never leave the water. The stream would become her guide. She stepped into the cool water and began following its course downstream. Walking in the stream was often easier than fighting through the thick vegetation. It also reduced the risk of getting completely lost. For the first time since the crash, Juliane felt a small sense of hope. As night approached, the jungle changed completely. The sounds became louder. Frogs croaked endlessly. Insects filled the air with strange noises. Animals moved through the darkness, hidden among the trees. Juliane had no shelter. No blanket. No food. She simply lay down beside the stream and tried to sleep. It was almost impossible. Every sound made her wonder if a dangerous animal was nearby. But she reminded herself not to panic. Fear would not help her survive. The next morning, Juliane continued walking. Hour after hour. Step after step. The water became her only companion. She was thirsty, exhausted, and hungry. She found almost nothing to eat. Although she knew many rainforest plants, her parents had warned her never to eat berries or fruits unless she was absolutely certain they were safe. Many tropical plants are poisonous. Taking a risk could be fatal. So Juliane chose hunger instead. It was the safer decision. As the days passed, her injuries became worse. The cut on her arm became infected. Flies gathered around the wound. Soon, tiny maggots appeared inside it. The sight was horrifying. Yet Juliane forced herself to keep moving. She believed that as long as she could walk, she still had a chance. She refused to give up. Sometimes she found pieces of the airplane. A suitcase. A broken seat. Fragments of metal. Each discovery reminded her of the terrible disaster. She also found the bodies of several passengers. The experience was deeply traumatic. She searched desperately for her mother. But she never found her. Without knowing it, Juliane was the only person from Flight 508 who was still alive. And every step she took brought her farther into one of the most dangerous jungles in the world. And, at the same time, closer to rescue. By now, Juliane had been alone in the rainforest for many days. She had lost all sense of time. She no longer knew what day it was. She simply woke up each morning, followed the stream, and hoped that someone would eventually find her. Her body was becoming weaker. She had eaten almost nothing since the crash. Her clothes were dirty and torn. Her skin was covered with insect bites. The deep cut on her arm had become badly infected. Every step was painful. Yet she refused to stop. As long as she could walk, she believed there was still hope. On the 10th day, something unusual caught her attention. Near the stream, she noticed a small wooden boat. At first, she could hardly believe her eyes. A boat meant only one thing. People had been there. Nearby, she found a simple wooden shelter used by local fishermen. For the first time since the crash, Juliane saw clear signs of human life. She called for help. Again and again. But no one answered. The camp was empty. The fishermen were away. Although she felt disappointed, she also felt hopeful. If people used this place, they would eventually return. Now she only had to survive long enough to meet them. Juliane decided to stay near the shelter. She was too weak to continue walking. As she rested, she noticed that her infected wound was getting worse. Tiny maggots had spread inside the cut on her arm. Most people would have panicked. Juliane remembered something her father had once taught her. Years earlier, he had treated an injured dog whose wound had become infected with parasites. He had poured gasoline into the wound. The gasoline forced the maggots out. Juliane looked around the shelter. There was an old motor lying nearby. Next to it, she found a small container with a little gasoline still inside. She knew it would hurt. But she also knew she had no other choice. Very carefully, she poured the gasoline onto the wound. The pain was almost unbearable. She clenched her teeth and tried not to scream. A few moments later, the maggots began to crawl out. It was horrifying. But it worked. The infection stopped getting worse. Years later, doctors would tell Juliane that this simple decision may have saved her life. That night, she slept inside the small shelter. It was the first time since the crash that she had a roof over her head. She was still frightened. She was still hungry. But she finally believed that rescue was possible. She only needed someone to arrive. The following morning, Juliane heard voices. At first, she thought she was imagining them. She listened carefully. The voices became louder. Then she saw 3 local fishermen approaching the camp. The men were shocked. Standing before them was a thin, exhausted 17-year-old girl covered in dirt and insect bites. At first, they could hardly believe she had survived alone in the Amazon rainforest. Juliane quietly told them who she was. I was on the Lanza plane. The men looked at each other in disbelief. For days, newspapers and radio stations had reported that everyone on Flight 508 had died. Yet here, standing before them, was a survivor. The fishermen immediately gave Juliane food and water. They treated her with great kindness. Knowing that she was too weak to travel alone, they decided to take her by boat to the nearest village. The journey took several hours. From there, Juliane was transported to a hospital. Doctors were astonished. She had survived a fall from an airplane. She had survived 11 days alone in one of the world's most dangerous rainforests. And despite her injuries, she was alive. It was one of the most extraordinary survival stories ever recorded. When Juliane became strong enough, she learned the heartbreaking truth. 92 people had been on Flight 508. She was the only survivor. Her mother had survived the crash itself but had died from her injuries several days later before rescuers reached her. The news was devastating. Juliane had lost her mother. But she had survived because of the knowledge her parents had given her throughout her childhood. Everything they had taught her about the rainforest had helped save her life. Doctors, journalists, and investigators all wanted to know the same thing. How did you survive? Juliane always gave a humble answer. She never described herself as a hero. She believed that luck had played an important role. But she also knew that staying calm, making careful decisions, and respecting nature had made all the difference. After several weeks in the hospital, Juliane slowly recovered from her injuries. Her broken collarbone healed. The cuts and bruises gradually disappeared. But the emotional pain was much harder to overcome. She had lost her mother. She had survived a disaster that almost no one could imagine. For a long time, people called her the miracle girl. Juliane never liked that description. She believed that many things had contributed to her survival. Luck had certainly played a role. But so had the knowledge her parents had given her. Without everything they had taught her about the rainforest, she knew she would never have survived. Soon after leaving the hospital, Juliane helped investigators find the crash site. Together, they flew over the jungle by helicopter. Looking down at the endless green forest brought back painful memories. Eventually, they located the wreckage of Flight 508. It was scattered across the rainforest. The accident had been devastating. Investigators later concluded that the airplane had flown into an extremely powerful thunderstorm. Lightning struck one of its fuel tanks. The explosion caused the aircraft to break apart in mid-air. Juliane had remained strapped to her row of seats as she fell through the forest canopy. Scientists believe that the thick branches of the trees, combined with the attached seats acting like a parachute, may have slowed her fall just enough to save her life. Even today, Experts describe her survival as extraordinarily rare. As the years passed, Juliane decided to follow in her parents' footsteps. She studied biology in Germany. Like her mother and father, she devoted her life to science. Eventually, she returned to Peru. Returning to the Amazon was not easy. Many people wondered why she would choose to go back to the place where she had experienced such terrible loss. Juliane gave a simple answer. The rainforest had never been her enemy. It was her home. She did not blame the jungle for what had happened. Instead, she continued to study and protect the incredible wildlife her parents had loved so much. Years later, Juliane wrote a book about her experience. She wanted people to know what had really happened. Not only during the 11 days she spent alone in the rainforest, but also before and after the accident. She explained that survival is not about being fearless. Everyone feels fear. What matters is staying calm, thinking clearly, and making good decisions even in the most difficult situations. Documentaries and films have been made about Juliane's incredible journey. People around the world continue to be amazed by her story. Some are fascinated by the plane crash. Others are inspired by her determination. Many admire the quiet strength she showed throughout her life. Despite everything she experienced, Juliane remained humble. She never sought fame. She simply continued doing the scientific work that had always mattered to her. What can we learn from Juliane Koepke? Her story reminds us that knowledge can save lives. The lessons we learn today may become invaluable tomorrow. It also teaches us that staying calm during a crisis can make all the difference. When everything around us seems hopeless, careful thinking is often more powerful than panic. Most importantly, Juliane's story shows us the incredible strength of the human spirit. Even in the darkest moments, hope can survive. One determined step after another can lead us toward safety. More than 50 years have passed since Flight 508 crashed into the Amazon rainforest. Yet Juliane Koepke's story continues to inspire millions of people around the world. It is a story of courage, of resilience, of knowledge, and of hope. It reminds us that even when life changes in a single terrifying moment, we may be stronger than we ever imagined. If you enjoyed learning English through this true story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me create more stories like this for you. And if you would like to support my work, you can buy me a coffee on Ko-fi. You can find the link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next story.